When you ask most people what they desire, you may hear things such as, I desire love, I desire wealth, I desire freedom, I desire safety and security. And these are all perfectly fine and normal desires, but then you may have others who say, I desire power, I desire control, I desire obedience. Desires can be both good and bad, light and dark, because the energy of desire rests in the astral plane. So therefore, all positive and negative emotions and desires, the desires that come along with those emotions, can be found there. National and international conflicts, such as war, are rooted in some type of desire. What people typically refer to as geopolitical interests, using air quotes, those are really just extensions of desires. Since nation states are made up of people and those people make decisions rooted in desire, really any large group can tap into the astral vibration of desire and use it for good or for evil. So this is not something to be taken lightly. Desire is a very powerful emotional force, and if misused or abused, can lead to a lot of vices such as rage, greed, lust, gluttony, etc., where you constantly give into your deepest, darkest desires, often without even thinking twice about it. So it's impulsive. This leads to addiction, right? So the inability to control emotional sexual desire is why semen retention has become so popular among men, right? So I'd like to introduce a book that I've recently come across called The Gene Keys. Released about 10 years ago by Richard Rudd, The Gene Keys details a system of ascension, as I like to think about it. The author calls it, quote, a new code book of consciousness, end quote. And it's meant to unlock gifts within you that all of us have inside of ourselves. These gifts are spread out across what are 64 total gene keys. So 64 gene keys means 64 gifts. Each of the 64 gene keys comes coupled with its own shadow, gift, as I just mentioned, and siddhi. So in Tantric Buddhism, a siddhi refers to a type of supernatural power that grants one psychic or magical ability for that particular siddhi. But initially, before you can even get there, you have to first engage in shadow work and with the shadow of whatever gene key you're focusing on. The goal is to practice a type of inner alchemy and rewire your DNA based on your shadow work in what eventually becomes an entire shift in your consciousness and lifestyle. The book, The Gene Keys, is based off of the I Ching. So if you've heard of the I Ching or if you've studied the I Ching, it's very similar to that. You can almost view it as an updated version of the I Ching in many ways. So I'd like to direct your attention to the 30th key specifically, called Celestial Fire. This is the key that holds the shadow of desire, which is the subject of this video. Rudd describes desire as a hunger or yearning for a certain type of experience. This could be economic in nature, it could be sexual. The sky is really the limit. What the 30th shadow does, and I think everyone listening right now should spend some deep time doing shadow work around the 30th shadow of desire. But what the shadow does is it convinces you to effectively give into your desire, to pleasure yourself and satiate your hunger for whatever it is you feel you need. But once you do this, you find that you are never really full, right? You find that this hunger, this yearning to release into this desire keeps coming back over and over again until it becomes a habit. And if you maintain this habit for a long enough period of time, it then becomes an addiction. And before I continue, I guess I should specify and say I'm not talking about desires that are rooted in something positive or productive or helpful for you or other people. I'm talking about desires that are toxic, like desires that are rooted in something unproductive, something that is potentially harmful to you or other people, right? So we all know different vices that lead to very negative desires like that. In the book, The Taoist Secrets of Love by Mantak Chia, who I've talked about in previous videos, it says, quote, after initiation, intensity of desire is essential to force the seed of essence or the seed essence up the spine. Not only is sexual desire spoiled by orgasm, but the will to enlightenment itself is temporarily lost, end quote. But here's the thing, and this is the position Rudd takes that I agree with. Certain desires you may have, some of them you never really truly overcome, especially if we're talking about sexual desires. And because of the world we live in currently, other desires like the desire to have more money or more wealth may not be a desire that you can overcome by design, right? Because of the economic structure of the country. This is my warning to some people in the SR community about not mistaking sexual alchemy and retaining with sexual repression, you know, and or destroying your libido, your pure sexual energy. What you actually must do is embrace your desire as being a part of who you are. It doesn't mean giving into desire. That's what you were doing previously. That's what you were doing before when you were living in shadow, the shadow of desire, but also not attacking yourself for having those passions. You must unlock the gift of the 30th key, which is the gift of lightness. Now, taken at face value, the gift of lightness seems strange. How does lightness help with dealing with desire? What is lightness anyway? It's important to remember that a key's gift and city are not the same. You begin moving into the gift after a lengthy process of contemplation on the shadow, among other aspects of shadow work. There's no real book necessarily on how to do this. There's no one way of doing shadow work, but know that shadow work must be done, and it's not something that you're supposed to rush through. Like, you're supposed to spend a decent amount of time on contemplation, but whenever your spirit is ready to advance and move on, you will know. You're going to feel it. The gift is what you begin to experience as your brain begins to rewire itself, and you spend a significant amount of time outside of the shadow of that particular key. So in this particular case, outside of the shadow of desire. Rudd describes the 30th key's gift of lightness as a, quote, new operating wavelength for humanity that requires you to enter more deeply into life's suffering than ever before, end quote. What Rudd means here is that by living within your desire and not succumbing to its temptations, you actually begin to experience a type of mental clarity, a deeper state of awareness that lightens your very being, allowing you to coexist with your desire without giving into it. Anyone who has ever dealt with addiction and has overcome this addiction has experienced this at some point in their journey. It may take years to kick a habit, and throughout that process, you are constantly bombarded with temptation that you have to fight, likely on a daily basis. At some point, you get to a space where you begin living with your desire, right? And actually feeling better as a result of your ability to maintain self-control. So self-control is critical to all of this. I'm about to talk about something else that shines even more light onto this. So this is the gift of lightness. It is the, I would say, almost carefree joy of living under the pressure of intense desire that you refuse to engage with. Think about it. Most goals require some level of suppressing desire to obtain whatever it is you're trying to achieve. You can't have a nice body without suppressing the desire of overindulging certain foods and certain habits, certain activities. You can't do a dopamine detox if you can't suppress the desire to engage those dopamine triggers. Controlling desire is an integral part of piercing through the veil of this matrix, this simulation, the Maya, as it was called. But you have to convert your toxic desires into productive ones, because we do need some desires, right? So whenever you have the desire to do something unproductive or damaging to your mind or body or spirit, replace that bad desire with a good desire. The desire to ascend, the desire to learn a new skill, the desire to build, the desire to educate, whatever the case may be. Just don't do something negative, and use your mental alchemy skills to convert that into something positive. Now, before I discuss the superpower of the 30th key, the city, and what unlocking it means, I want to draw your attention to another key. So we've been talking about the 30th key. I want to talk about now the 29th key. The 29th key out of 64, of course, is what Rudd calls the, quote, programming partner, end quote, of the 30th key. So every gene key has a programming partner, which represents another key that goes along with the key that you're working on. So you can think of them as components of a larger mental archetype, where the ultimate goal is to tap into the power of multiple keys working together instead of just a single key, right? So you're accessing, more of your gifts. You're using more of your gifts at once. You're tackling more shadows at once. So instead of working on one shadow, you're working on multiple shadows. If instead of tapping into one gift, you're tapping into multiple gifts. And then, as you're going to see in a second here, multiple cities, multiple powers. So the 29th shadow is half-heartedness, right? So we all know, like, if you've studied shadow work, you know that when you start doing shadow work, the whole point is to take something that you don't like about yourself, something, either it's a vice, or it may not even be a vice. It just might be like a bad habit. It might be some sort of negative character trait, whatever the case may be. You want to focus in on that. You want to hone in on that and get to the root of where that comes from, so that you can fix it, so that you can really alter your psychology, rewire your brain, basically update your operating system. And so, like I said, the 29th shadow is half-heartedness, or a lack of effort, and when combined with the 30th shadow of desire, it creates a very potent concoction of emotional chaos that basically radiates throughout your entire astral body and the astral plane itself, which is the plane of emotion. The 29th shadow plays into two main things. It plays into overcommitment or the lack of commitment, right? So the 29th shadow, I don't want to say it's laziness, but it's like, laziness certainly plays a part into half-heartedness, So here's another quote from the book on commitment. So Rudd writes, quote, "There is nothing that is worth doing in life unless it is done with absolute commitment. It doesn't matter if you love it or hate it. If you attempt anything half-heartedly or lazily," this is me adding my 2 cents to it, but if you attempt anything half-heartedly, you might as well not attempt it at all. Without commitment, action lacks power or direction, and above all, it lacks luck, end quote. So that is the gift of the 29th key. The gift is commitment. And some people, I know, hearing that, they're like, what? Like, that doesn't sound like a gift. Now, you can see why these two keys actually share the same programming, and it very much is a gift, because there's a deeply esoteric meaning behind commitment that I think a lot of people, it just goes over their head. So like on a deeply psychological level, you can't control your desires without the gift of commitment. Think about how many things this applies to. How many wealthy people do you know or you've heard of, whether you've heard their life story or whatever the case may be? How many wealthy people do you know of who got their wealth because of half-hearted, feeble attempts to achieve their goals? I know, me personally, I haven't heard of that before. I've heard of very successful people who kind of had a leg up, right? They either had some sort of inheritance or knew the right people or something like that. But that's not the same thing as like not even making a bare minimum attempt at being successful. Like they still had to do something. Like there was still something they had to do to even be able to have their the access that they had to even be useful in the first place. Pretty much to be successful requires both self-control of the 30th shadow of desire, so that you are not distracted by self-pleasure, and it also requires, success also requires the gift of the 29th key, which is commitment. It requires both. When you truly commit to conquering your demons and doing deep shadow work to control your toxic desires, to better your mind, body, and spirit, you are living in the gifts of both the 29th and 30th keys. All right? Achieving any goal requires commitment, or you're not going to actually achieve it. You see what I'm saying? So it's actually way more important than people understand. Depending on how long you want to spend on shadow work, beginning to experience the gifts of the 29th and 30th keys is not something that should take weeks and weeks of time. Maybe some other keys perhaps, but these two particular keys, not so much, which is likely to take time. What is likely to take time is the emergence of the cities of both keys. The 29th city is the supernatural power of devotion. The 30th city is the divine state of ecstasy that Rudd calls rapture. So devotion and rapture, those are the two cities. Before I go into detail about these psychic powers that you can manifest within yourself, I should first note that going from shadow to gift, while challenging, is obtainable, I would say, for most people. Like if you, again, going back to commitment, if you just have basic levels of commitment and you really set the intention, if you set the intention of actually achieving this goal, you can do it. But going from gift to city is the true quantum leap. Okay, it is orders of magnitude more difficult, and on an abstract level, the 29th gift of commitment is needed to obtain any and all of the cities of all of the 64 gene keys. They all require commitment and maybe even strong devotion to the mission of unlocking that power. Devotion being the city of the 29th key. So this will take time. It could take weeks or months or longer, potentially. So let's start with the 29th city of devotion. Devotion is the natural evolution of commitment. Whatever desire you are transmuting through the 30th key, commitment to that inner alchemy over time creates a higher and higher frequency, which activates the heart chakra. You're going to actually kind of begin to love what you're doing. This is essentially powerful when practicing semen retention for men or tantric practices in general. For men, this is when the true energetic benefits of retaining can be seen, because your aura will become so strong and magnetic, you will be able to draw in practically anyone. Okay, make no mistake about it. This power is the power of devotion and magnetism. Okay, this is magnetism. Even the author says the 29th city evokes a type of sexual energy around the devotee, which is what makes him or her so magnetic to other people. This is a city that must be activated for all semen retention practitioners. This is the power for any of you watching this who are on SR or you're on that journey. The 29th key is where it's at. The 29th key is ultimately a path that allows you to ascend through the simulation, through this matrix, through a deep love and commitment to transmute the energy of the desire of the 30th key. Okay, so these are why these two keys tie into each other. It is the path where you become a vehicle to break taboos and chart a path into the unknown. Okay, you will become a highly magnetic being, and if done through the practice of semen retention, you have surrendered completely to the heart. Okay, and your aura is full of almost sexual energy. Many speakers, specifically I'm thinking of Joe Dispenza, has spoken on how important your heart is and in the heart center. Because the heart is so tied to emotion, and emotion is directly tied to the astral plane, the astral realm. So any type of like spirit work, you know, is directly tied to that. It's directly tied to like your heart chakra, which if you're looking at the Kabbalistic system, the heart chakra is most synonymous with Tifereth, right? So, which I want to say stands for beauty. So now where does the 30th city rapture come in? Well, recall that I said that Rudd calls this a quote, great divine ecstatic state. So when I say ecstatic, you think of the word ecstasy, right? Bliss. So this is just a way of saying that while you are experiencing the magnetic power of the 29th key through what is effectively a deep activation of your heart chakra and love center, you are also in a deep state of divine bliss. Rudd says that this is a shamanic type of state, that the 29th and 30th cities combined represent an archetypical stream within your DNA that causes powerful mutations in your endocrine system. So we're talking about the pineal gland here. Okay. So this work, the 29th and 30th keys, directly impacts your pineal gland. So again, you see how important just these two gene keys has on so many other things. Like, it's going to have a direct impact on your pineal gland. So this is going to have multiple impacts on, like, when it comes to opening up your third eye. And there's actually a key for that as well. I might do a video on it as well. So here's the final quote I want to read from Rudd, where he says, "The state of divine rapture is really akin to being burnt by the fires of bliss over and over again. These are people who are so flammable that the smallest thing will set them off, and whoever comes near them will very likely catch their devotional energy. The nature of the mutated solar plexus system, which is where this 30th city lies, is to carry awareness outside of the physical body through the aura. Thus, the 30th city is what creates the devotees of its programming partner, the 29th city of devotion. These two cities radiate their power and Shakti through the morphogenic field of the enraptured one. This is why certain teachers and masters can literally transform the hearts of their devotees forever. The aura of such a being is as palpable as it is dangerous. It is dangerous to the human mind that cannot comprehend such a phenomenon and will not let go of trying to be in control. The very lifeblood of this 30th city is about disillusion into the primal chaos of the divine frequencies." So that is a lot, but and I'll even go so far as to say there are a lot of different ways to interpret that in terms of what that looks like in the physical world. So I go back to magnetism. Okay, I go back to self-control and the true power of self-control. Again, especially if we take it back to to semen retention. Okay. With these two powers unlocked, you set a solid foundation for the rest of the keys in the book. However, if you are not living in the gifts of commitment and lightness, and if you are still consumed by the half-hearted toxic desires of the 29th and 30th shadows, not only will you not be successful in unlocking the cities of these keys, but you will also likely not unlock any of the other 64 keys in the gene keys either. At their most basic level, they all require commitment and self-control, the control of desire. This will have major impacts on your life because you can use this same philosophy for any toxic desire rooted in a vice, to transmute that energy into psychic magnetism powered by a vibrant heart chakra and a strong aura powered by the sexual energy that you have cultivated. I do believe that sexual desire is one of the best desires to tackle first because of the bodily changes that are noticeable and apparent very early on in the process. So I will leave you with that, and I hope you got a lot out of this video, and I will be making another video soon to go over the next two keys that actually tie into these two. So there are more keys, and this is actually part one, and there will be a part two, because the ultimate goal is to use these two keys with the two keys that I'm going to talk about next in the next video to actually ascend, to break through the veil. So with all that said, this is Smart, and I hope you have a nice day.